Something very amusing is happening right now with the Texans, and I'm extremely amused by it. I'm somewhat put off by it. It is the locker room number one source for Texans digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can see me here throughout the season. You can also see and hear me on SNL with Cody Stutes, which is where this thing kind of magnified. And we had an intense back and forth. You should check that out. Apple, Spotify, also the new YouTube channel. We're a few thousand deep in less than a month of that. So right along for the best Texans coverage in season, out of season. You've come to the right place. So there's dialogue going on about the Texans offensive line coach and should they fire Chris Strausser, the offensive line coach, and should that happen? And I'm amused by it for a number of reasons. We're going to get into the Bobby Slowik thing as well. I think there's a lot of reasons to get rid of Bobby Slowik, but I also think there's one reason that is mentioned when keeping him that I think is the worst reason of all. We'll get into that, the most polarizing topic of the Texans season.
Damn it, Bobby.
In a little bit, and why it's actually just a really polarizing, unique situation. But this is why I don't care about the O-line coach talk around here. It's based on experience. It's based on covering this team, and it's based on the willingness to understand and progress into admitting when maybe you were wrong about something. For years, we were handcuffed by the Bill O'Brien system, the Patriots system. It was hell on earth. And whenever the Texans got to a certain point where they were winning division titles and they were losing in the playoffs, you kind of just accepted the Bill O'Brien offensive scheme for what it was. So who did you take your anger out on? You took your anger out on the offensive line coach. And I was one of the ringleaders of that. I used to talk so bad about Mike Devlin and the offensive line scheme that he's run and the way that he handled himself. And I'll be damned if this year Mike Devlin is the offensive line coach for the Chargers, and he did an excellent job. Now, I know recently, the last time that we saw him, it was against the Texans and the Miko Ryans, because of the good job he does on defense and the good performance the Texans put on, they made it look bad. But Mike Devlin, for all the talk, he was a good offensive line coach as soon as he went and coached with Jim Harbaugh and coached in a good offensive system. Meanwhile, Bill O'Brien, his offenses have continued to play grab ass. So why was I directing my anger at the offensive line coach? The Texans have had like 5 offensive line coaches in the last 6 years, and all of them have sucked. They've all been terrible. They've all been awful. And we shift our attention towards the offensive line coach whenever we don't want to accept the obvious. And Chris Strausser last year, for all the talk about how terrible he is, and he might be awful, last year, all I heard was how good of a job he'd done. The offensive line was depleted. There was one game where they had like 4 starters out. They were able to win. And all I heard about was how great Chris Strausser was. And then fast forward to this year, now the offense stinks. And all of a sudden, I should get excited about an offensive line coach and offensive line hires and all that. I'm not saying I'm above it. I'm just saying that I don't think it's worth my time because there's a bigger issue, and it's the offensive system. Now, are we in a situation where we're going to be handcuffed to a system like we were during the Bill O'Brien era? Maybe not. But I think systematically, and with the body of work that we have with Bobby Slowik, who you can also say did a better job last year, I think problems with the way in which this organization evaluates offensive guys and functions on offense is a major issue. And injuries are not the excuse. That's the one thing I want to make clear. Yes, they lost Stephon Diggs. Yes, they lost Tank Dell. Yes, you're a better football team when you have those guys. But when they were fully healthy, the entire theme from not just this locker room, but the actual locker room there was, we aren't doing enough with this offense. Then you lost Diggs. They still weren't doing enough. Then Nico Collins was out for a handful of games, and they weren't doing enough, and he came back, and they continued to not do enough. And then you see the way they function at the end of games against Green Bay, where you run twice and then throw short of the chains. In other times at the end, we saw it against Kansas City at the end of the first half, at the end of the second half, when you were going for it on 4th and 10 and didn't know. There's a lot of issues, and it's not just about injuries. So the question is this: should the Texans hire a new offensive coordinator?
Damn it, Bobby.
For me, the answer is yes. And it's based on a number of things. Some of these things are the previously mentioned things, the way in which they function, etc. But I also think the one thing that I've learned about this team and about D'Amico Ryans is that D'Amico Ryans is a defensive coach. We knew this before, but we have enough of a body of work to see that everything from the way he evaluates defensive players to the way he adjusts when guys are hurt, finding the role for Jalen Petrie and then adjusting back to that, to the way that he moves his guys around on defense, it's elite. It's awesome. It's great. And it makes sense because he was one of the most respected defensive minds when he came here. And he was one of the most respected defensive players when he played. He's looked at football from a defensive perspective for a long time. And that's why when you look at the Texans defensive coordinator, Matt Burke, he doesn't even have to call plays. He doesn't have to call plays. He's just basically a resource for D'Amico Ryans, and he's perfect in that role. And I think it works good. D'Amico still calls the defense. Matt Burke is a resource because you don't need him to be the guy that takes control of the other half of the side of the ball. But then you have Bobby Slowik. And the unique responsibility here is when you have a guy that is that defensive minded, you need a guy that commands the room. You need a guy that has the charisma to be able to say, this is my offense. D'Amico, hey, I want to earn your respect, and I want you to take a back seat to me. I'm not nervous. I'm not calm, cool, and collective. I want you to, I got this offense. I'm going to handle it. And I don't think Bobby Slowik is that guy. I think Bobby Slowik could be a good offensive coordinator. His PFF background, he's a film nerd. He worked there for a couple of years. He has a football background. He started out on defense. I think Bobby Slowik could be an offensive coordinator for an offensive-minded coach that actually calls plays. I think he could go help Kyle Shanahan out and be a passing game coordinator. I think he could be Sean McVay's offensive coordinator while Sean McVay has the play sheet in his face. I think he could do it with Sean Payton. I don't think Bobby Slowik is built to control the offense the way that it needs to be controlled when you have a defensive-minded head coach like that. Now, there's a lot of things that could happen. There could be some growth by Bobby Slowik. He could end up getting better. Just based on me being around him all the time, seeing it, watching the way he handles it, I don't think Bobby Slowik is the type of offensive coordinator that you need here. I don't see that. I don't think that. I don't think there's like some sort of like magical resume. I hear people say, well, you need an experienced play caller. I don't think that's the case. I'm still on the Josh McCown train. I think Josh McCown could come in here. I think he's going to be a future head coach. I think Josh McCown could immediately command that side of the ball. He'd be able to give the appropriate amount of pushback to D'Amico Ryans, and I think he would earn D'Amico Ryans' respect as the ultimate offensive guy. I don't think Bobby Slowik is that guy. I think there's some other guys with experience. Cody Stutes did a good job on his website on the written word, and we'll talk about it on SNL a little later on with the names of guys of offensive coordinators. I just don't think Bobby Slowik is that guy. And I think the worst reason to keep Bobby Slowik, and I hear this all the time, is you don't want CJ Stroud to change systems. You don't want multiple offensive coordinators. That's the dumbest reason ever. Lamar Jackson won MVPs in the first year of new schemes, completely different schemes. The scheme he's in now and with Greg Roman. CJ Stroud, last year, it was the first year in the system. He did his thing. You'll be able to figure that out all around the world in the NFL. Teams are learning new schemes. So if the scheme's the wrong scheme, then there's no reason to keep the coach. I always think that's funny. I always refer to this like in college football preseason editions or episodes where this team sucked, and then you have, well, they're returning 9 starters on offense. Well, that offense sucked, so that doesn't matter. So if you're keeping it the same and it sucks, that's not a reason to keep it. There's a lot of reasons to keep Bobby Slowik. Maybe it was just an off year. Maybe you think he gets better. Maybe he's developed. Maybe he's not a finished product. But not changing the system and not changing offensive coordinators for CJ Stroud, that's the last thing that you should worry about. Because if this is a sign of things to come, what we saw this year, I got news for you. 365 days from now, we'll be reacting to the firing of Bobby Slowik, and they'll be looking for a new OC. So I'm going to ask you, should the Texans hire a new OC? My answer is yes. I think so. I think they should. I'm not going to deflect my attention towards the offensive line coach and repeat what I did before. So save that. Hire whoever you want at offensive line coach. If Bobby Slowik ain't the guy, that's a problem. I think you need someone who demands that half of the ball in this situation. And here's the other thing when it comes to the O-line and the offense really as a whole. The Texans have no trust on the offensive line in any area. I don't trust them to develop guys. I don't trust them to use assets. I don't trust them to decide when guys should start. I don't trust them to decide to put guys in that were starting before. I don't trust them with the lineup. I don't trust them at all. So that's another thing when it comes to the offensive line. I'm going to push back no matter what because they haven't earned that right. The same reason why after D'Amico Ryans decides to sign a defensive lineman in this offseason, I'm going to support it because he knows what he's doing. Right now, the people who said, you want to hire an offensive-minded coach, those people feel validated because the Texans are clearly up here when it comes to defense and down here when it comes to offense. I still think D'Amico Ryans is the guy, but he's going to have to get it right on the other side of the rock. It starts with the offensive coordinator, not the damn offensive line coach. I think they need a stronger leader. I think they need someone who knows what he's doing a little bit more. And whether you have a fully healthy team or whether you have a team that is depleted in certain areas, it looks like an offense that at least knows what the hell they're doing. That's the bare minimum.
Damn it, Bobby.
This is the Locker Room. Subscribe, like, right along. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Offseason continues, baby. That means more work for us. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. Check out SNL. Got a little bit heated talking about the O-line coach. You might like that.